Corporal Jake Miller moved carefully through the dark hallway of the abandoned Vrexian research station. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor, echoing in the empty corridors. The place gave him the creeps. Just 6 weeks ago, this station had been full of alien scientists and workers. Now it was completely empty, like everyone had just vanished in the middle of their work. Coffee cups, or whatever Vrexians drank, were still sitting on desks. Computer screens were still glowing with half-finished reports. "Jake, you picking up anything weird?" Lieutenant Amy Brooks's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Yeah, my scanner's going crazy. There's something alive down in the containment area," Jake replied, checking his medical scanner again. The device was showing life signs, but they were weak and getting weaker by the minute. The Vrexians had left behind equipment worth millions of credits. Nobody just abandons that kind of money without a really good reason. That thought made Jake nervous as he headed down to the lower levels where they kept the test subjects. The temperature dropped as he descended and his breath started fogging up inside his helmet. When he reached the containment wing, the smell hit him like a punch to the face. Even through his suit's advanced air filters, the stench of decay and infection made his stomach turn. The room was lined with cages, most of them empty with their doors hanging open. But in the corner, inside the largest cage, something moved. Jake approached slowly, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. What he saw made him freeze in place. Inside the cage was a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen, but also strangely familiar. It looked like a massive cat, but not quite. This thing was the size of a grizzly bear, with 4 powerful legs instead of 2. Its body was covered in what should have been beautiful silver fur, but now that fur was ruined. Blood and pus had turned the silver into a dirty brown mess. But the worst part was the parasites. Jake had seen some nasty things as a combat medic, but this made his skin crawl. Creatures the size of tennis balls had dug into the beast's flesh. They were see-through like jellyfish, and Jake could see dark fluid moving inside them as they fed on the poor animal's blood. The parasites pulsed with each feeding, growing fatter as the beast grew thinner. The creature must have sensed Jake watching because it slowly lifted its head. The effort seemed to take everything it had. Its eyes were golden like melted honey, and when they met Jake's eyes, something passed between them. Jake had seen that look before. He'd seen it in soldiers who'd been hit by enemy fire, lying in the mud waiting for help. He'd seen it in civilians trapped under collapsed buildings. It was the look of someone who knew they were dying but hadn't given up hope yet. "Please," those eyes seemed to say, "please help me." "Jake, what are you doing? Get out of there now." Amy's voice was sharp with worry. "We don't know what happened here. That thing could be infected with something that killed all the Vrexians." But Jake was already moving toward the cage. His hands found his field medical kit without thinking. This was what he did. He was a medic. He saved lives. It didn't matter if the life belonged to a human or an alien cat thing. Suffering was suffering, and he couldn't just walk away. "Amy, I need you to prep the medical bay on the ship," Jake said, pulling out his tools. The creature watched him with those golden eyes, too weak to move but clearly aware of what was happening. "Are you insane? We can't bring that thing aboard. We're not leaving it here to die," Jake said firmly. He reached through the bars of the cage slowly, letting the creature see his hand. "Hey there, big guy. I'm going to help you, okay? Just hang in there." The creature made a sound, so quiet Jake almost missed it. It was somewhere between a purr and a whimper. Despite all the differences between their species, Jake understood perfectly. It was saying, "Thank you." The medical bay on the Pioneer was in chaos. Captain Robert Hayes stood in the doorway, his face red with anger. "Miller, have you lost your mind? You brought that thing onto my ship?" Jake didn't look up from his work. The creature, he'd started calling it Ghost because of its pale, silvery fur, was laid out on the largest surgical table they had. Even unconscious, it was impressive. And dying. "Captain, with all due respect, I couldn't leave it there," Jake said, adjusting the IV drip he'd rigged up. The standard equipment wasn't designed for alien biology, but Jake was making it work. "It's a living being, and it needs help." Dr. Lisa Coleman rushed in with her datapad, her face pale. Jake, I've identified those parasites. They're stellar leeches. According to every medical database in the galaxy, once they infest a host, it's over. 100% fatal. No cure. No treatment. Nothing. Jake looked at the parasites more closely. They were disgusting things, latched onto Ghost's body like giant ticks, their translucent bodies showing the dark blood they'd stolen. What did the Vrexians do when their creatures got infected? Lisa scrolled through her pad. According to their logs, they marked this one for termination. They were going to kill it and burn the body. That's their standard protocol. Of course it is, Jake muttered. The Vrexians were known for being practical to the point of cruelty. If something was broken, they threw it away. If someone was sick, they isolated them. Everything was about efficiency with them. Well, we're not Vrexians. We don't give up that easy. Tom Bradley, the ship's engineer, poked his head in. Jake, you need any help? I heard you've got some kind of alien cat in here. Tom, perfect timing. Jake's eyes lit up. These parasites, they have copper-based blood. Different from the iron in human blood or the silver in Ghost's blood. That means they might be vulnerable to electromagnetic fields that wouldn't hurt normal tissue. Tom's eyebrows went up. You want me to build you a bug zapper for alien parasites? Exactly, but it needs to be precise. We need to target only the parasites, not Ghost. For the next 3 hours, Jake and Tom worked together, turning the medical bay into a makeshift engineering lab. They pulled apart scanner units, rewired surgical fields, and created something that had never existed before. A targeted electromagnetic pulse system designed specifically for these parasites. This is insane, Captain Hayes kept saying, but he didn't leave. None of them did. Amy Brooks arrived with coffee. Lisa kept running simulations on her computer. Even crew members who weren't on duty started gathering outside the medical bay, watching through the windows. All right, Ghost, Jake said softly to the unconscious creature. This is going to be rough, but I need you to hang on. The procedure was brutal. Jake had to work on each parasite individually using the electromagnetic field to weaken them before physically removing them. They came off with wet, sucking sounds that made everyone cringe. Each time Jake removed one, he had to immediately seal the wound and inject antibiotics directly into the area. Hour after hour, Jake worked. His hands started shaking from exhaustion around hour 8, but he didn't stop. Amy took over holding the field generator so he could focus on the extraction. Tom kept adjusting the power levels. Lisa monitored Ghost's vital signs, calling out warnings when they dipped too low. Last one, Jake said finally, his voice hoarse. 14 hours had passed. The final parasite was the biggest, attached right over Ghost's heart. One wrong move and it would be over. The medical bay was silent except for the beeping of monitors. Jake activated the field one last time, watched the parasite weaken, and then pulled. It came free with a horrible squelch, leaving a gaping wound that Jake immediately packed with synthetic tissue and healing gel. Come on, Ghost, Jake whispered. Come on, buddy, fight. The monitors showed Ghost's heart rate dropping, then dropping more. Then, a steady beep, weak, but steady. Ghost's vital signs stabilized. The medical bay erupted in exhausted cheers. Jake collapsed into a chair, his scrubs soaked with sweat and various fluids he didn't want to identify. 2 hours later, Ghost's eyes fluttered open. The creature looked around confused, then focused on Jake. Slowly, painfully, it raised its massive head and pressed it gently against Jake's chest. The message was clear across any species barrier. Thank you. Jake put his hand on Ghost's head, feeling the soft fur that was already starting to shine again. You're welcome, buddy. You're safe now. The change in Ghost was nothing short of miraculous. Just 3 days after Jake removed the parasites, the creature was up and walking around the medical bay. Its wounds had closed up faster than anything Jake had ever seen. The matted, dirty fur was falling out, replaced by a shining silver coat that seemed to glow under the ship's lights. This is impossible, Dr. Lisa Coleman said, staring at her scanner readings. The cellular regeneration rate is 3 times what it should be. It's like Ghost's body was just waiting for those parasites to be gone so it could heal itself. But the physical recovery was just the beginning. Ghost was smart. Really smart. It started small. Jake walked into the medical bay one morning to find Ghost had figured out how to open the door to the supply closet. The creature was sitting there, looking proud of itself, surrounded by packages of the protein bars Jake had been feeding it. "How did you even—" Jake started, then noticed Ghost watching his hands as he pressed the door panel. The next day, Ghost opened the main door by itself, perfectly copying the sequence Jake used. Within a week, Ghost was responding to verbal commands. Not just simple stuff like sit or stay, but complex instructions. Jake would say, "Ghost, can you bring me the blue medical kit from the third shelf?" And Ghost would pad over, stand on its hind legs, and carefully pick out the right kit with its teeth. "I've figured out what Ghost is," Lisa announced one day, bursting into the mess hall where Jake was having lunch. "I ran the DNA patterns through every database we have. Ghost is a Chironian battle cat." Everyone in the room went quiet. Tom Bradley dropped his fork. "That's impossible. The Chironians went extinct 30 years ago when their planet was destroyed in the Void Wars." "I know, but the genetic markers are unmistakable," Lisa said, pulling up images on her datapad. "These creatures were legendary. The Chironians bred them as companions and protectors. They're supposed to be incredibly intelligent, loyal, and, well, basically the perfect combination of a pet and a bodyguard." Jake felt a weird pride, like a parent whose kid just got into a good school. But then Ghost did something that changed everything. It was evening, and Jake was sitting with Ghost in the observation deck, just talking. He'd gotten into the habit of telling Ghost about Earth, about humans, about anything really. Ghost seemed to like listening. But this time, Ghost started making its fur glow. Not randomly, but in patterns. Bright, dim, bright, bright, dim. "Wait a minute," Jake said, sitting up. Are you trying to talk to me?" Ghost's eyes seemed to brighten, and it repeated the pattern. Jake grabbed his datapad and started recording. Over the next few hours, they worked out a basic system. Short glow meant yes. Long glow meant no. Different patterns meant different things. And that's when Ghost told Jake the horrible truth. Through painstaking communication with Ghost flashing patterns and Jake asking yes or no questions, the story came out. Ghost wasn't alone on that station. There were others. Ghost's family, its pack, whatever you wanted to call them. They were still there, still in cages, still infected with those parasites. Jake found Captain Hayes in his quarters. "Captain, we have to go back." "Absolutely not," Hayes said immediately. "We barely got out of there the first time. I'm not risking my ship and crew for what? For living, intelligent beings that we're leaving to die?" Jake interrupted. "Captain, Ghost can communicate. It's told me there are 8 more Chironian battle cats in that station. They're suffering right now, dying slowly, and we're the only ones who can help them." Hayes rubbed his temples. "Miller, I understand you feel responsible, but regulations are clear. We can't—" "Since when has humanity ever let regulations stop us from doing the right thing?" Jake asked. "We're the species that runs into burning buildings to save strangers. We're the ones who dive into frozen rivers to pull out someone we've never met. We domesticated wolves, for crying out loud. Captain, those creatures down there, they're counting on us. Even if they don't know it yet." Ghost chose that moment to pad into the captain's quarters. It walked right up to Hayes, sat down, and looked him in the eyes. Then it started glowing. A slow, steady pulse that somehow conveyed sadness and hope at the same time. Hayes looked at Ghost for a long moment. "How do you even know we can save them? What if they're too far gone?" "Then at least we tried," Jake said. "That's what makes us human, isn't it? We try, even when the odds are impossible." Over the next few days, as they prepared for the rescue mission, Ghost showed more of its abilities. It could sense when someone was approaching from 3 corridors away. It knew when the ship's engines were about to have a minor fluctuation before the engineers did. Once, it suddenly pushed Amy out of the way just as a loose panel fell from the ceiling. "It's like it can sense danger," Amy said, scratching Ghost behind its ears. The creature purred, a sound like a diesel engine idling. Ghost is going to be our secret weapon, Jake said, watching Ghost practice opening doors and operating simple equipment. It knows the station. It knows where the others are. And it wants to save them as much as we do. The night before they were scheduled to return to the station, Jake found Ghost in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The creature's fur was glowing softly, creating patterns Jake had learned meant family and hope. "We'll get them out," Jake promised, sitting down next to the massive cat. "All of them. That's what humans do. We don't leave anyone behind." Ghost pressed its head against Jake's shoulder, and for a moment, they just sat there together, a human and an alien cat, preparing to do something impossible because it was the right thing to do. The Vrexian station felt even creepier the second time around. Jake adjusted his helmet light as he led his small team through the airlock. Amy Brooks was right behind him, followed by Tom Bradley carrying the modified electromagnetic equipment, and Maria Rodriguez, one of the ship's best medical technicians, pulling a cart full of medical supplies. Ghost padded ahead of them, its silver fur glowing softly in the dark. The creature knew exactly where they were going. "The main corridor has automated defense turrets," Jake explained, remembering what he'd seen on his first visit. "They'll shoot anything that moves." Ghost made a soft chirping sound and veered left, leading them into a maintenance shaft. The tunnel was cramped and dirty, barely tall enough for the humans to walk hunched over. But Ghost's glowing fur lit their way better than any flashlight could have. "I can't believe we're doing this," Tom muttered, dragging the heavy equipment behind him. "Breaking into an alien station to rescue space cats." "Not just cats," Amy corrected. "Intelligent beings who need our help." They crawled through the tunnels for what felt like hours following Ghost's lead. The creature never hesitated, turning left here, right there, always knowing exactly where to go. Finally, they emerged in a large containment area, and what they saw made them all stop in their tracks. 8 cages lined the walls. Inside each one was a Coronian battle cat in various states of dying. Some were still moving weakly, others lay completely still, and Jake feared they were too late. The smell was overwhelming. Infection, decay, and despair all mixed together. "Oh my God," Maria whispered, immediately rushing to the nearest cage. Inside was a full-grown battle cat, similar in size to Ghost but with darker fur. Parasites covered almost every inch of its body. Its breathing was shallow and ragged. In the next cage was another adult, this one with golden fur barely visible under the mass of parasites. But it was the third cage that made Maria lose it. "There's a baby," she said, her voice breaking. The cub was tiny, no bigger than a regular house cat from Earth. It was so covered in parasites that Jake could barely make out its actual body underneath. Maria was already pulling on extra gloves, tears streaming down her face. "Jake, we have to save this one first. It won't last much longer." "All right, everyone knows their jobs," Jake said, forcing himself to focus. "Tom, get the electromagnetic field generator set up. Amy, start preparing IV lines. Maria, you're with me on extraction. We'll start with the cub." Ghost moved between the cages, making soft, comforting sounds. The other battle cats who were still conscious seemed to recognize Ghost, their eyes following it with a mixture of hope and confusion. Ghost pressed against each cage in turn, its fur pulsing with gentle light patterns that seemed to say, "It's okay. Help is here." Working on the cub was heartbreaking. Maria held the tiny creature while Jake carefully removed each parasite. The baby was so weak it couldn't even cry, just made tiny whimpering sounds that broke everyone's hearts. Maria kept talking to it softly. "It's okay, little one. We've got you. You're going to be fine." They worked in shifts, moving from cage to cage. Each battle cat presented different challenges. One was so aggressive from pain that Ghost had to calm it down by pressing against the cage and purring. Another was unconscious and needed immediate blood transfusions using the synthetic blood Jake had prepared. Tom's modified equipment worked perfectly, weakening the parasites just enough for extraction. Amy managed the IVs and medications like a professional orchestra conductor, keeping track of 8 different patients at once. Maria never stopped moving, never stopped comforting the creatures even when exhaustion made her hands shake. 15 hours in, Jake's comm unit crackled to life. It was Captain Hayes. Miller, we've got a problem. 3 Vrexian patrol ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding to know what we're doing here. Jake's blood ran cold, but he kept working. How long do we have? They're 20 minutes out. You need to evacuate now. Captain, we still have 3 more cats to treat. We can't leave them. Miller, we're not leaving them, Jake said firmly. Not after we've come this far. They worked faster but carefully. No point in saving these creatures just to kill them with rushed treatment. 18 hours in, with the last parasite removed from the last battle cat, they began loading the weak creatures onto transport carts. That's when the main door burst open. A Vrexian commander stood there, tall, reptilian, with scales that shifted from green to black, Commander Thex according to his uniform. Behind him were a dozen armed soldiers. Humans, Thex said, his voice like grinding rocks. You will surrender the contaminated specimens immediately for termination. No, Jake said simply, stepping in front of the carts. These creatures are infected with Class 5 parasites. Protocol demands immediate termination. Your protocol is wrong, Jake said. We've cured them. Look. He gestured to Ghost, standing tall and healthy. This one was dying 6 days ago. Now look at it. Irrelevant. The contamination risk. Captain Hayes' voice came over the station's comm system. He'd been listening. Commander Thex, this is Captain Hayes of the Earth Frigate Pioneer. I'm recording this entire interaction. I wonder how the Galactic Council will react when they see footage of the Vrexians trying to murder sentient beings that humans have successfully saved. I wonder what the news networks will think about you abandoning these creatures to die slowly and painfully. Thex's scales shifted to a darker color. You wouldn't dare. Try me, Hayes said. Earth may be new to the galactic community, but we've learned one thing. Public opinion matters. And the story of heartless aliens trying to kill innocent creatures while brave humans save them? That's going to spread across every planet in the galaxy. There was a tense silence. Jake could hear his heart pounding in his ears. Then something amazing happened. Ghost began to glow. Not just random light, but beautiful complex patterns. The other battle cats, even the weak ones, joined in. Their bioluminescence synchronized, creating a light show that was clearly deliberate, clearly intelligent. It was like watching a conversation in pure light, proving beyond any doubt that these weren't just animals, but thinking, feeling beings. Even the tiny cub, held in Maria's arms, managed a weak but determined glow. Commander Thex stared at the display. His soldiers lowered their weapons slightly, entranced by the beauty of it. For a long moment, nobody moved. Finally, Thex stepped aside. You have 1 hour to leave Vrexian space. The consequences of your actions are your responsibility. As they loaded the battle cats onto their shuttle, Jake looked back at the station. They'd done it. They'd saved them all. Maria was cradling the cub like a baby, refusing to let anyone else carry it. Ghost was helping guide the weaker cats, showing a gentleness that belied its massive size. You know, Tom said as they lifted off, when I joined this crew, I didn't expect to become a space veterinarian. When humans see suffering, Amy replied, watching the battle cats huddled together for comfort, we can't just walk away. It's what makes us human. Jake nodded, exhausted but satisfied. 9 lives saved. 9 intelligent beings who would live because humans did what humans do best. The impossible when it's the right thing to do. Three months had passed since the rescue, and the Pioneer felt like a different ship. You couldn't walk down a corridor without seeing one of the Chironian battle cats padding alongside their chosen human. It was funny how quickly everyone had gotten used to having massive alien cats wandering around. Jake was in his new office. He'd been promoted to Chief Xenological Medical Specialist, which was a fancy way of saying he was now the galaxy's first and only expert on treating Chironian battle cats. Ghost was sprawled across the floor, taking up most of the room, its silver fur shining under the lights. The creature had grown even bigger since recovering, now standing as tall as Jake's chest when on all fours. You know, when I joined the space program, I thought I'd be treating human soldiers, Jake said, updating his medical logs. Ghost made a rumbling purr that vibrated through the floor. It was their morning routine. Jake talking, Ghost listening, and occasionally responding with light patterns. The door chimed, and Maria Rodriguez walked in with Spark riding on her shoulders. The little cub had grown too, now about the size of a bobcat, but still insisted on being carried everywhere by Maria. Its fur had turned out to be a beautiful pearl white with silver stripes that glowed when it was happy, which was basically all the time when Maria was around. Jake, you've got to see this, Maria said excitedly. The Galactic Medical Journal just published your treatment protocol. It's already been downloaded over 1 million times. Jake pulled up the article on his screen. His simple discovery that electromagnetic pulses could target the copper-based blood of stellar leeches had revolutionized treatment across the galaxy. The report said his method had already saved over 3,000 lives on different worlds, not just battle cats, but dozens of other species that suffered from similar parasitic infections. That's great, but look at this, Jake said, pulling up another message. The Galactic Council just voted. They've officially condemned the Vrexians' abandonment policy and adopted something they're calling the Human Protocol. Human Protocol? Maria asked, sitting down while Spark curled up in her lap. Basically, it means no sentient being gets left behind just because they're sick or the treatment is expensive. They're calling it the No Being Left Behind Protocol, modeled after how humans handle medical emergencies. Tom Bradley stuck his head in the door. Behind him was Titan, the biggest of the rescued battle cats with fur so dark it looked like space itself. Hey Jake, did you guys see the news feeds? We're famous. He pulled up a holographic display showing news reports from across the galaxy. The headline on the biggest network read, Humans and Battle Cats, the alliance that changed everything. The story had spread everywhere, how a human medic had refused to give up on a dying alien creature, how humanity had risked conflict with the Vrexians to save innocent lives, and how it had led to an incredible partnership. Look at this comment from the Altarian ambassador, Tom read aloud. While other species calculate the cost-benefit ratio of compassion, humans simply ask, how can we help? This may be their greatest contribution to galactic civilization. But the best part wasn't the fame or the recognition. It was what happened next. 2 weeks later, they received a distress signal from a mining colony on Kepler 442b. The colonists, a mix of different alien species, had been trapped by a cave-in for days. The rescue teams had given up, saying the life signs were too faint, probably just equipment malfunction. Jake and Ghost were part of the response team. As soon as they landed, Ghost started acting strange, its fur glowing in urgent patterns. The creature led them away from where the rescue teams had been digging, toward what looked like solid rock. Ghost says there are people there, Jake told the rescue coordinator, a four-armed Vrexian who looked skeptical. That's impossible. Our scanners show nothing. But Ghost was insistent, practically dragging Jake toward the wall. The other battle cats with the human crew were doing the same, all pointing to the same spot. We dig here, Jake said firmly. It took 6 hours, but Ghost had been right. They found a pocket where 37 miners had survived, their life signs too weak for standard equipment to detect. But the battle cat's enhanced senses had found them. Every single miner was pulled out alive. Back on the Pioneer, Jake found himself in the common area watching something that would have been impossible just months ago. Ghost and Spark were playing a game they'd invented, batting a ball of light between them that Spark could generate with its glowing fur. Amy's battle cat, a golden-furred female named Sunny, was teaching some of the crew a pattern recognition game using her bioluminescence. Even Captain Hayes had bonded with one, a dignified older battle cat named Sterling, who followed the captain around like a massive furry shadow, and somehow always knew when Hayes needed a calming presence during stressful negotiations. You know what the funny thing is? Maria said, joining Jake on the bench with Spark immediately jumping into her lap. The Vrexians spent years studying these creatures in cages, trying to figure out how to use them as weapons. They never realized what they really had. What's that? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Friends, partners, family. Maria scratched behind Spark's ears, making the little cat purr like a motor. The Vrexians saw them as tools to be used or discarded. We saw them as lives worth saving. And look what happened. We didn't just save 9 cats. We gained allies who can do things we never imagined. Ghost patted over and rested its massive head on Jake's knee, its golden eyes full of intelligence and affection. Through their light-pattern communication, Ghost had told Jake stories of its kind. How they'd once been companions to a peaceful species. How they'd been captured and experimented on. How they'd thought all hope was lost until a strange creature in a medical suit refused to let one of them die. The reports kept coming in from across the galaxy. Other species were starting to adopt the human approach to medicine and rescue. The phrase, "What would humans do?" had become a rallying cry for those facing impossible odds. And always, the story came back to a medic named Jake who looked at a dying alien cat and said, "I'm not leaving it behind." 6 months after the rescue, Jake received a message that made him smile. It was from a young Vrexian medical student. "I've decided to specialize in parasitic infection treatment using your methods. My professors say I'm wasting my talent on hopeless cases. I told them that's what they said about the battle cats too. Thank you for showing us a better way." As Jake looked around the common area, at Ghost playing with Spark, at Maria teaching the cub new tricks, at Tom tinkering with enrichment toys for the cats, at Captain Hayes unconsciously petting Sterling during a briefing, he realized something profound. Humanity's first contact with the galaxy hadn't been through military might or technological superiority. It had been through simple compassion. By saving 9 cats that everyone else had written off, humans had shown the galaxy what they were really made of, and in return, they'd gained not just allies, but family members who would stand by them no matter what. "Hey, Ghost," Jake said softly. The massive cat looked up at him, its fur glowing in the pattern that meant friend, family forever. "Yeah," Jake smiled, understanding perfectly. "Forever, buddy. That's what family means." The galaxy had learned something important about humans that day on the Vrexian station. Humans don't calculate the odds when lives are at stake. They don't abandon the suffering. They roll up their sleeves and do whatever it takes because to humans, every life has value. And sometimes that simple belief can change the universe.